C. T. Studd, Cricketer and Pioneer, by Norman P. Grubb. Chapter 13. A Man's Man. Their return home in 1906 brought them yet another proof of God's faithfulness. The girls needed schooling, of which none was to be obtained at Ooty. A boarding school would be best, but how could the fees be paid? 18 years before, this young couple had gone to the uttermost limit of surrender to God. They had staked all on God's faithfulness. They knew that unless the Lord supplied their need, they would have no hope of giving their children as good an education as they themselves had enjoyed. But they believed God, and now the time to prove his faithfulness had come. They committed the matter to him, and this is what he did. He gave the girls exactly the education which their father and mother would themselves have chosen for them, if they had the means to do it. He moved someone to send 3 of them to one of the best girls' schools in the country, at Sherborne, and to see them through their whole education while they lived with their granny for the holidays, and 3 of them to finish their education at Lausanne. Wonderful though this provision was, it would have been as nothing to their parents if it had not been accompanied by the one great blessing that really mattered, the salvation of their souls. 2 years later, C.T. wrote, "It is a great joy to see all my girls right out on the Lord's side. For that alone I feel I owe the blessed Saviour every drop of blood and affection in body and heart. I wish I could be like him. He was clad with zeal as with a cloak." Ministers and workers among men now seem to have awakened up to their golden opportunity of using an outstanding converted sportsman to reach men. YMCAs, brotherhoods, police institutes, Wesleyan centre halls booked and rebooked him. In those 2 years, 1906 to 8, he must have spoken to tens of thousands of men, many of whom never went to a religious service, but were drawn to hear him by his sporting reputation. He gripped and stirred his audiences to their depths, and many were the decisions for Christ. His method of speaking dead straight as man to man, no mincing matters, using the ordinary language of the people, coupled with his humour, made a tremendous appeal to men. A Birmingham newspaper, for instance, which had a reputation for speaking slightingly of missionary and religious work, surprised its readers by the following comments: "Mr. Studd is a missionary to emulate." And so all that band of collegemen from Handsworth thought as they cheered him to the echo. This man with the red tie and slim athletic body and the young face, after more than 20 years of harness, he is bubbling over with life and humour. No pessimism about him, no lukewarmness. He loves and he follows. He teaches what he believes. He keeps a brave, sunshiny face through all. No subtleties appear to puzzle him. His faith is as brave as his speech is clear and straight. An instance of the way he started to talk to men was the following at a business men's luncheon. "Gentlemen, you've had a rich dinner. You'll be ready for plain speaking. I'm not going to tickle you with a pulpit or academic display of language. I shall speak in ordinary language, in that which we're all accustomed to use when engaged in the real battle of life or in heart-to-heart talking. I once had another religion, mincing, lisping, bated breath, proper, hunting the Bible for hidden truths, but no obedience, no sacrifice. Then came the change. The real thing came before me. Soft speech became crude salt. The parlour game with the nurses became real cricket on the public ground. Words became deeds. The commands of Christ became not merely Sunday recitations, but battle calls to be obeyed, unless one would lose one's self-respect and manhood. Assent to creed was born again into decisive action of obedience. Orthodoxy became reality. Instead of saying, Lord, Lord, in a most reverent voice many times and yet continuing deaf to the simplest commandments, I began to look upon God as really my Father and to rely upon Him as a real Father and to trust Him as such. Instead of talking about fellowship, I enjoyed it. Instead of being unnatural and constrained, I became natural and unconventional. I talked of God and Jesus Christ as real, living, personal friends and relations. They have never chided me for it. If a man is willing to obey and sacrifice, he soon learns what is the blessed reality of the fellowship of God's Son Jesus Christ, familiar and social intercourse. In other words, I dropped the Canton ceremony and became a Christian. Reverence, I observe in the New Testament, is not apparent politeness and manifest disobedience, but filial or childlike obedience, trust, and love. He carried his evangelism onto the streets and into the houses of those who entertained him, instant out of season as well as in season. One instance was when at a certain country house in Dorset he led both host and butler to Christ. The host wrote later, I have many a time thought of you in our talk. I don't think it is so much want of faith one has to contend with as one's own weakness, which makes it hard for the spirit of honesty to accept the free gift. You will, I know, say, accept, and I have accepted, thank God. And a few days previously, C.T. had a letter saying, the butler at Cliff called on me and in course of conversation told me of his taking up your hot water in the morning with the result of accepting Jesus Christ as his Saviour. On another occasion, he was staying with his great friend Dr. A.T. Wilkinson of Manchester, the greatest friend of the last years of his life. The doctor ordered a growler to take him to the station and told the cabby that his fare was C.T. Studd, the cricketer. The cabby said that he remembered seeing him play at the Old Trafford ground. The doctor told this to C.T., and the result was that the fare got up outside with the cabby and tried to win him to Christ as they drove to the station. The cabby never forgot that drive.